Let's talk about making some plans to buy some gold for very specific reasons, but then let's talk about it long enough that we get to the more probable case, which is an end result that doesn't actually match up to the plan, which, to be fair, is probably a good solid par for my course. So I try to focus my videos here on the practical side of gold and silver ownership. Get into my plans a little bit, and those plans are pretty straightforward. I buy gold as a rainy day fund, or I buy it as a multiplier. Doesn't matter how you want to look at it. So if an emergency hits, and I don't mean a small one, not a broken furnace, then I have a backup fund that I can use to supplement my income for an extended period of time, or worst case scenario, I can use it to start over. And then if the opposite happens, if an opportunity hits, well, I have readily available capital in the form of gold, and I can take advantage of it that way too. Now, both of those possible needs, they're significant enough to me that I'm pretty aggressive with my gold buying. I've called this a hobby before, but that's only because I also enjoy it. So if I'm going to throw a third reason on the heap here, well, I'm also buying the stuff to help out my kids at some point. And if I was buying for any one of those three reasons, rather than all three of them, I'd have a different approach. If I was buying my gold just to throw in a hole for future generations, well, I would only use the money that I don't need. That's how I would buy it. I would only buy it with whatever I have left over. It'd be sporadic. And between us, hey, I do that sometimes. I've bought gold with cash that I guess I wouldn't have expected to have, some kind of win. Now, because I'm not just buying it to throw it in a hole for someone else to come across at some point, I also buy gold at the top of the budget as well. It's a little bit like paying yourself first. I mentioned that in a recent video. I do that, and in this case, I'm paying myself with gold. So the idea of saving enough to put toward a property or funding a backup plan, that never comes from unexpected bank errors in my favor. This is scheduled. So I'm scheduling against a goal. I guess you'd call that a plan. And that's the reason that I opened up with that backstory. I have a few different plans for using gold in the future. I'm going to give some to my kids. It's a little bit like throwing it in a hole. But I will let them do whatever they want with it. I'm going to nudge them a certain direction, but it'll be theirs to decide. And then I'll use some of it myself while I'm still above ground, either toward a property where I sell off a large amount and then probably start right back in, buying it slowly and steadily. Maybe I'll need it for an emergency. Again, hopefully I'll be able to buy back in. And if nothing else, well, maybe I'll sell some off in retirement, slow and steady again, but it'll be going the other direction. I'll be selling rather than buying. So that's the easy part. That's the use case. It's why I use it. Again, it's practical to me. You can't take it with you. Anytime I use actual numbers, there are going to be variables, and I'm about to use some here. They usually apply to me or maybe to a hypothetical case that I'm making up. Everyone's different, but I'm just going to tell you, I have 20 ounces earmarked for each of my kids. Now, I don't think I've ever mentioned that here before. Maybe it'll be more than that by the time I'm in the ground. I don't know, but that's the amount that I will not sell if something else comes up. And I've mentioned before that I use a vaulting service. Now, it's not specifically for my kids' gold, but that's a good reason to have it. I don't need the gold that I'll never sell close at hand. So let's get further into those numbers. I mentioned what I hope to keep for my kids. Beyond that, my own plans, I've mentioned them here quite a few times by now. My backup fund was planned around 24 months of X amount of gold. So for fun, we can call it 48 ounces, 50 because I like round numbers. Well, 50 ounces of gold is $100,000 in today's value, and $100,000 just does not buy much property these days. So it's a down payment on a property. It's maybe a few years of runway to keep my family off the streets if a big emergency comes up, or it's a supplement for retirement income. And really the power move here is that it can be for any of those three. I'm ahead of my running goals, so what I'm working on right now will probably just roll into the stretch versions of each of those things, and probably even in reverse order. The most likely case is that I'll have more to use in retirement, and maybe it'll go toward a property, and if so, I'll have more in gold put toward it. Hopefully it will not be an emergency need, but if all of those things go off without any surprises, I don't need it in retirement, I don't need to buy a property, and I don't run into an emergency need, well, then my kids, I guess, are going to end up with more. But my point here is that it's an intentional plan, and I do intend to use a significant amount of what I'm buying. Man plans and God laughs. That is a great line from the Bible, and I'm going to take that out of context here for a minute because all of my plans could go south. I could die walking my dog. And in that case, my family would get to do whatever they want with that gold, I guess. Maybe I stay where I am now. I never need another piece of land. I never move to a new home. Maybe the economy rebounds and is stronger than ever, and my need for gold in retirement just might never hit. Now, any of those situations would mean that I don't really have a case to use my gold, at least not to my plan. The upside here, though, is that any unexpected plan derailment, I guess that means the gold is still here. It just rolls on to the next purpose. And I think I just made the point that if I don't use something, it's still here. The point, though, is that there are use cases. There is a plan behind it. And that's the purpose of the video. I have explained every part of my plan, but I don't think I've ever done it all in one video. So I'm going to fix that. I have been buying gold for 15 years. I'm sure I mentioned that before, but I plan to buy for a minimum of 10 more. That's when I retire. I have not mentioned that. So my goals were to have 20 ounces for each kid. That's separate from anything else I do. And then I want 50 ounces as a backup fund. Now, if I don't use that, that rolls into the larger use of subsidizing a property or the longer term use of subsidizing retirement income. All of those numbers are variables. They don't really apply to you, just to me, but I'm going to fill in the blanks just to explain this idea a little bit. If it does come down to me subsidizing retirement with some gold, I think it's reasonable to plan for 3 to 6 ounces every year for 15 to 30 years. I know that's a wide spectrum here, and it's a lot of gold, or maybe a little. Depends on who you are. For me, the low side of that is the plan, and the high side of that is a stretch goal. I probably don't need 150 ounces or 180 ounces, whatever, to live out my golden years in retirement. Who knows, maybe I'll live to 110, but I'm trying to be realistic with this. The variables here are pretty simple. You got time in retirement and then the amount that you think that you're going to need to subsidize. Now, I originally planned for 4 ounces for 20 years, that's 80 ounces. 80 ounces of gold seems pretty reasonable to me. Again, that's going to seem like a little or a lot, depending on your circumstances. 80 ounces is a variable. Now, to get to 80 ounces over 25 years of buying, again, 15 years in the past, 10 in the future, I would have to average a little bit more than 3 ounces of gold per year. Another way to look at that would be a 1/4 ounce of gold every month. Now, again, that 1/4 ounce of gold a month kind of seems like a magic number to me. The biggest variable here, the one that I've ignored so far, is your current age. Now, for those of us who have 10 years of buying yet in front of us, maybe we don't have 15 years behind us. So if I was working toward 80 ounces in just 10 years, 8 ounces a year, that's a different situation than 3. And in a case like that, I'd probably be working toward 2 ounces of gold per quarter. That's how I'd go about it. That'd be 2 ounces every 3 months. I know it kind of escalated quickly, but again, that's a variable. So it's a formula that is pretty simple if you look at it in 3 parts. The first part is just what you need. Now, a minute ago, I said 15 to 30 years of post-retirement subsidizing. Between us, I'm planning for 30, but 15 is closer to the average here in the United States. That means you retire at age 65 and then you live to 80. Now, I like to hope that I'm going to retire by 60. I'm going to live to 90 or further. So I use 3 to 4 ounces for 30 years. Now, 3, that's my actual goal. 4 is my stretch goal. So that looks like 90 ounces or 120, depending on which side of the spectrum you're on. Now, that's a big number, but I have 15 years of a head start, and I have plenty of time ahead of me to keep after it. Now, the second formula is just figuring out the buying schedule, how to get there. If the number is 80 ounces, you divide that by the number of years that you have to buy yet. 5 years to retirement, well, you'd have to come in pretty heavy if you wanted those 80 ounces. That might not be realistic, I don't know. 16 ounces a year, that's a pretty big haul. Now, if your answer to the first formula was 45 ounces, that'd be 3 ounces at 15 years of retirement. Well, 5 years of prep would mean buying 9 ounces a year. 10 years of prep would be about 4.5. 15 years, that would allow 3 ounces a year. And again, that is back to the 1/4 ounce of gold per month, or an ounce every quarter. It comes out to 3 ounces a year. So no real comments on what's reasonable to each person. That's just simply how you'd plan around it. Now, the last formula is just how you would use it. If you're planning to need 4 ounces a year for 20 years, maybe you'd sell an ounce per quarter. It's really just looking at that first formula of what you actually need and then thinking through whether or not it makes sense. Well, you really sell an ounce of gold every 3 months when you retire. maybe, maybe not. But that would be a pretty straightforward use case. Probably most people would only sell as needed, but this last formula really isn't that important. It's just a sounding board for the plan, whether or not it makes sense, and then it's a straightforward use case for the gold that you're buying if it does. So this isn't about retirement planning to me necessarily. It's just about how I figured out my goals and then what I'm doing to get there. Maybe even a peek into my thought process behind those practical use cases, because I'm not just buying gold to be some kind of king in a coming apocalypse. I have lower flying aspirations here. And I'm guessing that you do too, even though that would be kind of cool. Now, if you are looking at this like some kind of retirement plan, specifically Bald Guy Money, he had something specific in his recent video, spreadsheets and everything. You can check that out if that's your plan. To me, this is no one thing. It's just a broader idea. And call me simple, but my math is just the amount of gold that you need times the length of time that you need it. And the reality here is that I might buy an income property with it instead. Maybe I'll buy a castle in Scotland. Who knows? I'm going to keep my options open. And that makes it hard to think that what I'm doing is clearly a retirement plan. So let's call it good there. I think I just gave a plan and then joked about buying a rundown castle in a place I've never been to. So if that isn't proof that I'm not a financial planner, well, I don't know what is. So let us know what you think if you have a plan already. And if you're on track, let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button. That's a big help to spread the word. If you like the content, be sure you're subscribed, have those notifications turned on. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.